Welcome to another edition of Success Talk. This is Dr. Herbert Harris bringing you people who have done extraordinary things, who have faced challenges, who've overcome those challenges, and who have made breakthroughs to do and be very successful. Today, we have a special guest from Charleston, South Carolina, Stephanie Gore. Welcome to Success Talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be able to connect with you again.
Yes, yes. Well, Steph, I was reading your bio, and you really have gotten in the middle of this whole mental health thing, huh?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important for us to be a part of not only advocating, but leading the advocacy, through some transparency with our own story, our own journey, so that we are more relevant in the conversations.
Hmm. Now, this is an area I know there was a time, at least in North Carolina, when the legislature cut a lot of the mental health funds. Were you around when that happened? And kind of, it seemed to have a profound impact.
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, it did have a profound impact on our communities, our schools, because individuals didn't have access to care. And we know access to care is critical when we want to see people be able to self manage. All mental health disorders, um, you know, don't have to be unmanageable. You right. We want to see people thriving. We want to see people still be able to manage their lives and have a sense of independence.
Mhm.
And so we did see a lot of limitations that came from that, right? We saw a lot of people just go into mental health crisis that otherwise could have been supported.
Yeah. So that funding is really critical for people to have an alternative.
Absolutely.
You know, I know when I was a child, mental health was like just swept under the rug. You never heard anybody talk about it. If anything, they just say, "Well, he's just crazy," and with no attempt to understand it or to fix it. Uh, Over the years, have you seen that change?
I have seen more meaningful conversations, even with some of our clergy and our religious leaders taking a step back and inviting licensed clinicians to the table so that they aren't misinterpreting some of the signs and symptoms of what could potentially be a mental illness, like even within the church and within the community, and making sure we don't shuffle these people and discard them, right?
Mm,
But make sure that we are creating a safe space for them regardless of what their mental illness is, and helping them, to better navigate it.
yeah, yeah. Well, as it's very interesting. You think of like when you have a cold or the flu, you take medication, you go to the doctor, and in a reasonably short period of time, you're over it. But I don't know that people have that same attitude about mental health. In other words, that it's treatable. I think there are a lot of people that don't realize it's treatable and it's illness just like, high blood pressure or anything else. That's a big switch because I guess we are so accustomed to quick fixes. Maybe it takes a little longer in the mental health paradigm, I guess it depends on what the issue is, but you can't just take an aspirin and be okay tomorrow.
That's absolutely true. And I think the more we have conversations about mental illness and mental illness awareness, I think the better off we are as a community, as a state, and as a country, because it affects all of us a little bit different, but we want to have normal conversations about
Mhm.
it. And sometimes we don't realize that a person may have had their own struggles until they are transparent about it, and they use themselves as an example to show other people that it's possible for you to still live a successful life and manage the illness and not let the illness, manage you.
I got you. Yeah. Well, this topic is so interesting. I kind of got myself out of order. I often like to get an idea about maybe your early years, your background, where'd you grow up, and what were your early years like in your family?
Oh, absolutely. So I was born in Sampson County, Clinton, North Carolina. Spent most of my childhood in Wilmington, North Carolina, and most of my early childhood education was there. Um, Came from a family of, African American, Indian descent, kind of like the blended family. Um, in Sampson County, and just very loving, supportive family, but non-educated, right? And so, coming from a generation of individuals that kind of made things possible for me, um, through hard work. So I learned hard work and work ethic. They
Mm,
worked the fields, right? They worked in the fields. Education wasn't a big part of what was presented to them, the generation before me.
mm,
But very loving um, individuals that were a part of my upbringing. And had it not been for that upbringing, and had it not been for the work ethic that they instilled at me, even at that age, with little to no education, um, I wouldn't be where I am today.
wow. Now you have brothers and sisters?
I do. I have several step siblings, and I have two brothers and a sister.
Okay. As you were sharing that, I think that generation, our parents, many of our parents who were not educated, but they had value for education.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's made a big difference. And I look sometimes, and maybe in your area, you might notice this. Some of the younger parents now, even now, you have grandparents like 45 years old now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely different. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I don't always sense that feeling of that feeling of uh that education was stressed. That
Hmm.
yeah. Have you experienced that in your work?
Absolutely. It definitely plays a part with intergenerational kind of ideals of what is important, what holds value. And when we look at the age differences, we definitely see some patterns of change
Mhm.
as it relates to older adults that might have been instrumental in my upbringing. I realize that there's people that I may be working with now that didn't have that same level of support.
Okay. Mm. Well, that's a paradigm, and I don't know that it's getting better. When we look at the school system and these different changes in the school system, how do you think that's going to impact, say, mental health?
Um, I think the more conversations we have, I think mental health advocacy needs to stay on the agenda. I think for so many cities and school districts, it has to be something that happens for the conversation to come to the table,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's sometimes in the moment of a crisis, or something traumatic happening to a student or a member of the community, right? And so it's those conversations when there's suicide or when there's other things involved
Mm-hmm.
that tends to grab the attention of all the powers that be and pushes us to the table together to be a unified voice of support and to try to figure out ways to bring more awareness. But then that seems to go away over time.
Mm,
And I think that's the disappointing part, is that when we have these courageous conversations, we want to keep it open, right? We want that to remain an open dialogue and not just go away until we have another crisis. And then it's almost as though we recycle the same people at the table, but we're
mm,
not really seeing effective change where
mm.
it matters the most because we're not keeping those conversations active.
Yes. This is such a, like a real a critical area right now with the gun violence and so many of the behavioral things now seem to go back to the mental health issue. Like all of a sudden now folks are saying, like maybe we need to look at that, you know?
Hmm.
So how do you think that impacts when you look at this gun community and the availability of guns? How does that impact mental health? Or how does mental health impact that?
I think they both kind of overlap. I think on one side, um, you know, maybe we have opposing views, but in some ways, I think everybody wants the same, and that's the safety. We want to
Hmm.
feel safe in our communities. We
Hmm.
want our children to feel safe in the classrooms. I mean, just things that have happened over the years, even more recent tragedies that happen right in the school,
Hmm.
right in the classroom, where teachers have had to become protectors,
Yes.
right? And that is not what we perceive our our educators to be. Um, but they've had to become protectors and shields for children against bullets and violence inside
Mm,
the school.
mm,
And I think it has shifted, definitely from the education perspective. It's shifted conversations where education has to include safety.
mm,
Education has to include what are the safety guidelines, right? To where why are individuals able to just get a gun off the street? And secondly, why do they have access to our children?
mm. Wow.
Right? So
Yeah.
guns are accessible in the streets, in the community, even a person with or without a mental illness um, has access to these guns. And then, secondly, the secondary issue, they have access to our children. We have to ask ourselves why.
Right. Wow. There's I think, a Chinese proverb, and it says, "He who he who runs out of words has the first blow."
Mm,
And so, when we sort of coming from a mental illness perspective, if a person's not able to get help and crises or situations arise, that could be a recipe for disaster.
absolutely.
Mm, mm,
Absolutely. And if we're honest, the schools, most schools are not equipped in time of crisis to
hmm.
deal with these things. They're
Right.
not staffed properly. We don't have enough mental health support professionals
Yeah.
that are in the school,
Yeah.
right? A lot of things are shifted to the school counselors, and they may have 800 students to one counselor. That is not
Yeah.
an effective way for that counselor to be able to navigate what's going on with those students and how to better help them. And
Yeah.
so by the time something is brought to the attention that there's a problem, we're more than likely already facing a crisis.
Yes.
So we're just responding to crisis, and we're really not being effective at changing laws
Yeah.
and other things that are going to save our children and keep our educators in the classroom.
Well, as you were saying that, Stephanie, those are the real issues of education. There's so much emphasis now on what are we going to teach the kids? Don't teach them this, do teach them that. But and I've seen these numbers before, when you have three, four, five, 600 students to one guidance counselor,
Yeah,
who's expected to be a guide to help people with their careers and with their other issues and the other challenges that they have. Those are some of the issues that we need to be looking at. You know?
you're exactly right. And unfortunately, some of those numbers are climbing,
Yeah,
right? We're
yeah,
looking at 500 or more students to one.
yeah,
That ratio and the expectation of that person to be able to manage that
yeah,
many students, right? We definitely need mental health advocates and professional support to be able to take care of those other things and create safe spaces for students.
yes,
Because if a student's having a crisis and they're told that they need to schedule an appointment because that individual already has 6 or 7 students scheduled that day,
yeah,
that's not conducive either to us helping that student get help.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting. So many of our leaders, I was listening to a commercial, and it was saying, if you have a reaction to this medication, call your doctor and get guidance. So with the COVID, if you think you have COVID coming on, call your doctor. Number one, a large percentage of the people don't have a doctor to call.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, when you call, you may be on hold for 45 minutes if you get a real person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then number three, you got to get into their system. So a friend called about a medical issue, and the doctor's office said, well, the earliest appointment is March 17th or March 16th, you know,
Yeah.
and otherwise go to emergency. And then we wonder why there's so many people at emergency. People just don't have alternatives. Mm, wow.
And you're definitely right. I can remember during the COVID crisis that we had, um, a lot of individuals were redirected to go to their nearest emergency room because we just didn't have enough mental health practitioners with availability to see patients,
Yes.
whether in person or telehealth. Everyone seemed to have had a waiting list.
Yes.
We couldn't get a psychiatrist for 4 to 6 months.
Mm,
Um, and we're talking about people that needed medication right away.
yes.
But it's gotten a little bit better since the pandemic, but there's still a wait. There's still a wait.
Yes. Stephanie, this is such a huge area. When did you first decide you wanted to be in this area?
Um, I think for me, I've worked for state government and I've worked for family and children's services early on in my career, always have been in the human services field. But in my experience, in working with community partners and being inside the schools and going into the homes and talking to the children and interviewing the parents, I saw a greater need that wasn't being addressed.
Mm,
And so sometimes we are addressing what appears to be the problem and it's just the surface.
got you. Yeah.
And so I saw myself as being more instrumental in helping people to change their lives from a different perspective of the cause of some of the things that were affecting their lives, and not just providing resources, even though that might be needed, but what else does this family need? What else
Mm,
does this child need?
yeah.
Because what we have found to be true is the recycling of generations and families through state and government systems where we're not addressing the core issues.
Mm,
We're
okay.
not addressing the reason why um, things have kind of been created where there's economic hardships, where there may be reports going to Department of Social Services or Child Protective Services. So working in some of those entities with human services fields, I saw the greater need where some people didn't have the tools, the resource, or access to care to make the needed or necessary changes in their lives to prevent some of these residual casualties that were happening in their life.
Wow. Yeah. Now, you worked in different government capacities. What made you decide to go on and set up your own agency, your own business?
I think having the flexibility um, and also having the ability to collaborate with other agencies, with nonprofits. We not only provide the mental health advocacy and support as clinicians,
Mm,
but we have psychoeducational groups where we're teaching,
mm,
right? So one of our main focuses has been anger management, not only for young adults, but we work with probation and other agencies where individuals may be required to engage in anger management programs because we want to help them not to reoffend.
yes.
So we want to spend more time helping these individuals deal with the core issues and the things below the surface. And so creating that platform for not only the mental health individual component, but also the psychoeducational group and being able to partner and collaborate to be able to help people really do the work, because it's a journey.
Mm. Well, making that transition from being an employee in an agency and to go into your own business, what was the main obstacle? I'm sure you thought about it for a while, but what was the main obstacle that kept you from making that leap?
Oh, it was many. It was many. I would be very honest and transparent to say one of the main hurdles that I faced, and I'm sure many other entrepreneurs face, is just making that first step.
Hmm.
It could be quite intimidating making that first step when perhaps you don't have people around you that look like you that are doing what you are trying to do. And
Mm.
so there may be a certain level of intimidation when you're the only representation at the table
Yes, yes.
and you don't have a core support group that looks like you and that is giving you pointers on what to do next. You don't have that map, you don't have that guideline. Those
Mm.
guidelines, you don't have that mentorship.
Yes. Well, how do you overcome that?
Um, I would say what was beneficial to me was focusing on what I already had, what was
Mm.
tangible, and not focusing on what I was lacking.
Oh, okay. Now that's powerful.
Right. So I
Mm.
had to kind of rely on God and rely on the tools that He had already given me, the gifts He had already given me, the people that He had already sent into my life to be a support, even if they were not instrumental in helping me map out my business plan and my goals. They were
Mm.
still a support to me.
Mm. I
So
got
for me, it was taking the focus off what I didn't have to start my business, but already just really focusing on what I already had and do I have enough to start,
you. Mm.
right? Do I
Yeah.
have enough to start? Do I trust the process? Do I serve um a God that is more than able and more than capable? And
Mhm.
am I going to trust this process and trust what I already have? And
Mm.
so realizing that I was hindering my own self because I had enough to start, but because I didn't have all the answers to questions, I didn't start. Um, I had the plan and had the ideas, but just reluctant to move forward.
Wow. That's a big piece, because I think many of us, want to make that break. And once again, there's that proverb that says the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And to take that step, and that's scary. That's scary. Now, once you do that, it's almost like you're saying that you're almost alone, because when you don't have people that look like you don't have that support system. I guess that can create kind of a loneliness or you know
Absolutely.
mm, and I,
Yeah. So I
mhm.
can remember writing something on my vision board when I first started out because that was something I kind of struggled with. And it was, I'm in business for myself, but not by myself.
Yes, yes.
And then I just wrote, I'm never alone. And I thought of all the scriptures that gave me comfort. And I put that on my vision board and I started my day from day one, looking at that and saying it out loud to myself and giving myself that positive affirmation until I felt better about making that transition.
Now you just packed so much into that. I mean, that's well, Stephanie, that's one of the reasons we wrote the 12 Universal Laws of Success.
And I love the book. I
Mhm.
still pull it out. Thank you so much for sending the book to me, a couple years ago, and just following you in the success class on Saturday mornings. It's been life changing for me as well as so many other people, I'm sure, because sometimes we just need it to be reminded.
Mhm.
Sometimes we need to see someone that looks like us that's telling us to keep going, right? You're on the right track. Be careful what you say and how you say it, because those things are manifesting. You're calling that to manifest into your life. So those things were definitely inspirational and motivational for me.
Mm, mm. Was there any particular chapter of the book that sort of stood out for you?
Um, I would have to say the chapter that talks about change.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, because I saw myself when you start a new journey, a new process, becoming a new business owner, um, change is inevitable. It's going to happen. It's a part of the growth, but change also comes with feeling some uncomfortableness,
Mm, yes.
right? Growth and change kind of create some uncomfortableness. And sometimes it may cause us to second guess ourselves or to think maybe this wasn't the right timing or kind of send us into some negative self evaluations and thoughts about ourselves.
Yes.
And so I think it was the chapter on change that I've read over and over and over the most.
Hmm.
Right. So after I read the book, I think that was the chapter I revisited most often,
Yes.
reminding myself that change comes because there's something, um, some area in my life that I need to grow. So
Mm,
I need to learn how to embrace the change because there's a benefit not only to me, but there's a benefit to my business, there's a benefit to my family, and there's a benefit to the communities I've been called to serve in.
wow. That's powerful. Thank you so much. When I hear words like that, it just reminds me that when I was writing the book, many times you get to the point where you're like, I don't know if people are really going to buy it. And you'll see things that kind of undermine your vision.
Mm-hmm.
But that idea to keep going and growing, keep on writing and writing, keep doing it. And over the years, I'm so thankful that I did it.
Yes.
It would have been very easy to not do it, but to just go ahead and do it, that made all the difference. And to see what it's done for people, has really been a blessing to me and to others. Now, in the area that is so critical right now, how do you handle distractions? Because when you're running a business, there's all kind of other things pulling at you. And yeah, I'm sure as a lady, as an entrepreneur, and in an area where there's not a lot of, like, say, people who look like you in that area, how do you handle distractions and or disappointments?
For me, handling distractions has definitely been a part of my time management,
Hmm.
right? And so I've tried to be more intentional about creating a work home life balance.
Yes.
And it has to start with managing my time. And so while I have time set aside to grow my business, time set aside to collaborate, there's meetings, there's consultations, that's important because you want to always be an advocate, right? Outside of earning a living for yourself, you want to be an advocate, right? You want to make sure that you show up in some of those circles to be a presence and to be a voice and a representation for others. And so for me, the biggest part has been time management with reducing the distractions.
Okay. Wow.
And I would say with disappointments, one of the greatest things that has been a blessing to me in my life is finding connections with people, even if they're not in my zip code.
Hmm.
I think sometimes we can shrink ourselves down in a space that we were not created to thrive in.
Hmm.
And there could be people that are in different cities and states that are connected with us in some way, and we can join forces with them and collaborate and work together. And so for me, that has been a pivotal moment for me in my career and in my growth, and even in the expansion of my business, looking outside of your zip code for the things that you need and the
Hmm.
people that you connect with that are saying, I've been where you are, I'm running a business in a different state, but I want to see you grow. I want to see you thrive. I want to see your success. and I want to see you make an impact where you are, where you live, and where you reside. And so connecting with people across state lines and not boxing yourself in to be limited to a certain area has just opened and expanded my mind and my concept of growth and what it truly means to have mentorship and truly what it means to network.
Hmm. Now, Stephanie, you've said something very powerful. I like the way you put it, to go outside your zip code. And the internet has given us a great tool to be able
Yes,
to meet people all around the world. And even the pandemic, then very often you say, well, what good could come of that? Well, one of the good things that did come of the pandemic is we learned how to communicate and navigate online because we couldn't go out to meet people and couldn't travel the way we used to. So, yeah, you've been able to use that very beneficially for your business and for your life. Yeah. Mhm.
absolutely. It's definitely been a benefit.
And when you can communicate with other people like-minded, I guess it kind of reinforces that you made a right decision and
Yes,
mm, yeah.
it's definitely refreshing, even if it's virtual, to
Uh-huh.
connect with someone who tells you that they're supporting you and what can I do to help you.
Yes.
And to see that representation in another person um, that doesn't come to the table feeling like they're in competition, but we're here together and how can we support each other?
Yes.
So that has definitely been refreshing, and even makes it easier to handle the disappointments.
Yes. Yes. Wow. Beautiful. You said something earlier that I sort of let it slip by, but you talked about a vision board.
Hmm.
And so many people, many of the young people now are kind of getting into it. But that sounds like a very powerful tool that you used in creating your business.
Hmm.
How did you do that?
With my vision board,
Yes.
I started out with just a core group, a small group of other business owners that looked like myself, and we became accountability partners to each other, even though we're not geographically located in the same areas. And that was one thing we committed to, was not just having virtual meetings and conversations about um, what our business plans are for the future, but actually putting that on a vision board and speaking it into each other's lives. So it became a part of just growing my network and expanding my collaboration with other people. And then we all made that commitment to, let's not only talk about it, let's put it on the board, and let's place it strategically to where we are reminding ourselves of who we are, what we've been called to do, and in what capacity our business, the direction we want our business to grow in.
So you all are really using the mastermind principle to the max.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's working.
Yes.
It's an
Yes.
effective strategy, not only with accountability, but sometimes we need to, it's something about having that visual reminder
Yes.
and
Yes.
strategically putting it where you start your day and you're looking at your why.
Yes.
Sometimes we need to remind ourselves of why we started this journey in the first place,
Yes.
so that when we become disappointed or distractions come, it's like, okay, let me focus back on my why. It's a bigger purpose than me. So
Yes.
that why kind of helps you with your motivation.
Yes. Wow. Woo! You just, I think you laid out some groundwork there that any entrepreneur person who's trying to, and I don't say go against the grain, to create your own path. Let's put it like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I often look back, you seem to be such a real dedicated, self-directed person. In your early life or even in your business life, is there one or two people who really made that difference? And you say, but for that teacher, but for that person, I might not be where I am now. But is there anyone like that in your life?
I would definitely have to say the people that were instrumental in my life, um, I would have to say would definitely be my mom and my grandmother. Um, Even though they were not a part of my journey on the professional side, it
Uh-huh.
was the foundation that they gave me as a child that
Yes.
was instrumental in me not giving up as a young adult and as a new entrepreneur, just remembering all the positive things that they told me about myself and told me you're going to grow up and you're going to do amazing things. And, and just hearing the echo of their voices was kind of the inspiration I needed to
Yes.
say, keep going.
Yes.
And of course, I had some wonderful teachers and I had some excellent professors in college that, gave me that pat on the back. But in order for me to get there and hold that seat, they were the two people like the wind beneath my wings to get me to that point in life um and to remind me to keep moving forward.
Wow. It's amazing, Stephanie. You can think back and you can hear the words they would say sometimes, some of their sayings.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. My dad used to say, boy, you better straighten up and fly right. I'm like, so what does he mean? And one day I figured it out, straighten up, put your house in order, get your mind lined up, get your things together, and fly right. Work hard. Don't stop. Keep flapping. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
As we sort of come to a close, complete this magnificent interview, I'm just, like just take my hat off to the great work you've done. The When you look at your accomplishments to date, what would you say is your greatest victory?
Wow. I would say my greatest victory is learning that resilience is for the greater good. Sometimes we look at the strength that we have gained through our own personal journey as being that of just our own, but it's for the greater good. We all have a greater purpose in some way. We just have to lean in to figure out what that is. But I would say that's my greatest takeaway is
Mhm.
that this resilience, sometimes we become strong by default.
Yes.
Life comes and it knocks us down and we learn to get back up. But just learning that through the process of all of that, the resilience wasn't just for me,
Uh-huh.
it was for the greater good.
For the greater good. And I guess we all live a life of example. We never know who's watching us. People who've been inspired by us. You know, there are people who are inspired by you and you've never met them. you
Yeah.
know, yeah. Wow. I remember once, as a young entrepreneur, I was, I had misjudged my cash very, very badly, and I was in a tight spot. If you can imagine doing a real estate closing, and your partner has the rest of the money, and he doesn't show up.
Oh boy.
Okay, and I needed a substantial amount of money, and I'm there in the office. I'm looking out the window, and I see a man, and he was a multimillionaire, but a very famous man in Harlem. And I went out to him and I said, "Sir," he said, "Hey, Herbert, how are you doing?" And I said, I need a situation. I got a closing, and I need to borrow $5,000." And he said, "When do you need it?" Now. And you know what? He not only he made the loan, but we literally had to go back and go. The bank had closed, and he had to go and get because he was an integral part of the bank. Anyway, we got the money. He loaned me the money, and I was surprised. It's like they say the Bible says, "Seek and you shall find." It said
Hmm.
I really had no idea, but I was at such a moment of desperation. I'm like, what can I lose? I'm already getting ready. The closing's going to fall through. I'm going to lose my down payment. And so when I went to pay him back, I asked him, I said, I'm curious. I said, what made you decide to loan me the money right there on the spot? And he said, I saw how you took care of your uncle.
Mm.
He said, they're very rare. He said, usually it's a son or a daughter that takes care of a parent. He said, but I've never seen a nephew take care of an uncle the way you did. He said, I always watch, and I'm not, I had no idea he was, I didn't even have any idea that anybody cared.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a powerful statement you had. You never know who you're going to be a blessing to. Wow. Well, Stephanie, if you look back at, how your life has evolved through school, what advice would you give your younger self, that self who's just coming out of high school, now getting ready to go to college? What advice would you give your younger self?
Not to second guess yourself,
Mm,
right? Self
mm,
identity comes through self awareness. But for so long, we've looked for validation to come from other people. And it hinders us from embracing our true self and following our dreams and following our heart into our own path. Because we're looking for someone to validate and say, yes, you're on the right path. Or yes, you should choose to live here or go to this school. Or yes, I'll support your business if you start a business of your own. And so I would definitely say not to second guess yourself.
mm. Wow. Ooh, that just sent a chill through my back because I can see, that scripture says, if you tell this mountain to be cast into the sea and doubt not,
Yeah.
when you second guess yourself, you're really doubting yourself. Yeah. Man. Now let's project ahead. Let's say 25 years from now, when you look at where your vision board and where you would like to be, what advice would you look back and give yourself right now based on where you will be 25 or 30 years from now?
Wow. That's a good question. Um, I would have to say to not get discouraged with the process because sometimes we're so impatient. We're impatient with ourselves, we're impatient in traffic, we're impatient in the restaurant because it takes too long for our food. So I think in life, we have just grown accustomed to things happening fast and
Mm,
swift.
yeah.
And some things are truly a process. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Delayed does not mean denied because it hasn't happened this year, because we haven't seen it manifest this week, does not mean that it's not manifesting or it's not happening. Some things are still in the process of becoming materialized. So sometimes we need to be reminded that it's all coming together and it's all working together for my good.
Stephanie,
Mhm.
I have thoroughly enjoyed this. What is the name of your company, your contact information? Because I tell you, you have shown an insight. You know, a lot of people operate in an area like mental health is a very nebulous, you're not quite sure. Law, you're clear. He's either guilty, not guilty. These are the rules of evidence, and it works.
Mhm.
But mental health is such an area that I'm sure many times you're not even sure how to approach it. You have to trust your feelings and trust yourself. Um, what advice would you give? Well, let's say this. What advice would you like to just give to our listeners? Those of you who hear this broadcast, is there any final words you'd love to give them?
I would say in the realm of mental health and mental health awareness, um, be aware that sometimes a person, it could be a person that you know, it could be a person you work with in your community, maybe even a member of your church. Remember that someone close to you, everybody can identify at least one to two people that you've come in contact with that you noticed that they were struggling at some point,
Hmm.
right? Whatever their struggle was with their mental illness, just don't be afraid to reach out and offer support.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you are trying to take the place of their therapist. It doesn't mean that you're trying to run their life or tell them what to do, But sometimes a person just needs encouragement to get help because there's so many stereotypes and so much negative stigma around mental health that sometimes a person knows that they're struggling, but they are afraid.
Mm,
They are afraid of the stigma and the labels and being shunned and being told that they don't have enough faith. I've had some people come and say, I went to the church and they told me I needed to fast and pray. I needed to have more faith. And so some of our concepts of what mental health is shuns people to the point where they are suffering in silence.
mm. Wow.
And
Yeah.
so I would say a reminder to all of us, because we're all a part of the human race. Remember the one or two people that you come in contact with that are struggling. It's okay to offer encouragement to that person and to let them know it's okay if you schedule an appointment and go see someone,
Mhm.
a professional to help you figure things out and sort things out. There's nothing wrong with that. Because so many people don't do it because of the stigma,
Mm,
right? I've even came in contact with some people um, that were it. They agreed to get help, but didn't want to get help in their city, right?
okay.
They said, can you find a clinician for me a couple cities over,
Uh-huh.
right? Because the stigma, they don't want to be seen going into the mental health office.
Yes.
They don't want to be, I can't park my car in front of the building.
Yes.
There's so much stigma and so much negative feelings and self-evaluations that are around that topic and conversation, which telehealth definitely helps us overcome some of those challenges because you don't have to always walk into a building to get that support and that help.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's powerful.
Yeah.
I asked you now, what is your website and the name of your company?
My company is Optimistic Solutions Counseling Services,
Uh-huh.
and my office is here in Charleston, South Carolina.
Uh-huh.
The contact number is 843-823-6940. And the website is www.optimisticsolutionswiththeS counseling.com.
Solutions with an S. Uh-huh. Counseling.com.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Well, Stephanie, this has been a fantastic, little less than an hour, but this has been fantastic. I want to thank you so much for sharing, for really, I think, giving a voice to an area that so many of us are just, number one, many people don't even acknowledge that it's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, there are a lot of us that need help that our ego won't let us go get help.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of us that have no idea what's going on. you know, that, you know, I know as a child, mental health had such a stigma that we didn't even think of getting treatment for it. You were either sane or crazy. There was no no in
No
between.
in between.
No, you see. So I think it's people like professionals. I think you've taken this whole area to a level of professionalism, just as a doctor, a brain surgeon, a heart surgeon, because it's just that important.
It is.
You know.
And we should normalize it just like we do going to the doctor
Yes. Yes.
for a physical. It's okay to check in with your therapist, even if there's nothing that you see as being problematic. We go to the doctor every year because the doctor says, well, you need to come in just for
Uh,
me to check you out.
right.
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 And so we need to add therapy to a regimen of healthy living
Mm,
and a lifestyle of wellness. We
yes.
need to make sure that our minds are sharp and that mentally we have the capacity that we need to continue to create a healthy work home life balance.
Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for being with us today. And folks, let me tell you something. This is an interview you're going to want you will want to listen to many times because number one, there's some nuggets on this interview that can help you make your transition from wherever you are right now to whatever you want to be. And there's some thoughts and some ideas for those of you who are in the mental health area, for those of you who are in any area where you decide to break away from the job, break away from the system, and to create your own business, be an entrepreneur. There's some beautiful nuggets here, and I think that when you listen to this broadcast over and over, it will inspire you, it will help you, it will guide you, and it will let you know that you can be anything you want to be, you can do anything you want to do, and you can have anything you desire, always knowing that the best is yet to come. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for an incredible interview.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure, Dr. Harris.
And so it is.